Ahead of the 2024 mega elections, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is set to unveil the Interim Budget 2024 on the 1st of February at 11 a.m., setting the stage for the temporary financial plan until the new government takes over. The comprehensive budget for fiscal year 24-25 will be presented in July, regardless of whether the incoming government is new or a re-elected one. Speaking exclusively to Republic is Shamika Ravi, who is the member of Prime Minister Economic Advisory Council. Listen in to what she has to say about the interim budget.
So, Dr. Ravi, thank you for joining us and speaking to Republic Business. Let me start off by asking you a very first important question. Since the budget is around the corner, interim budget is around the corner, what is your sense? Do you expect the budget to be simply a vote on account, a populist one, or a spoil sport?
How many times in the last, let's say 9 years, have you seen the budget being any of these categories that you pointed out? By now, I think it should be fairly clear that, you are going to see continuity. And over these years, we have also seen a very broad strategy come up. The first 5 years were about stabilizing the institutions, cleaning the banks, getting our core architecture in place, right? After that, the last 5 years have been about, first the pandemic was a big deal, but capex have been, every consecutive years you have seen a rise and go towards certain sector. I would suspect you are going to see very much of the same. So no major surprises.
Okay. We have seen in the last few budgets the government continuous focus on the capital expenditure.
Yes.
Do you think that this is going to sustain in the long run, and this budget will also see a record capex allocations?
I doubt if you're going to hear any new major, catering to election type of, because you did not even see it last year.
Right.
When many states were going in, you're going to see continuity, Rajat. I think by now it is very clear that capex is very important for us, and you should also see where is capex going. So it's going towards strengthening of your core infrastructure. All of those which are long-term productivity enhancing,
okay,
whether it's in the rural or in the urban sector, but you're going to see more of the same.
Okay. When we talk about the capex, the one concern area that emerges is the private capex,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
all economists and experts are saying that private capex is lagging behind, and it's the government capex or the government who is doing the heavy lifting in the economy.
Yes.
What is your assessment of private capex as of now, Dr. Ravi?
Well, first of all, we have seen a turnaround after 10 years almost. So I think by now we have to acknowledge the fact that there was a time period between 2010 to 14 when I think the state at large was a little bit at war with private capital, with private enterprise in general.
Right.
And we had, whether it was the retrospective tax, whether it was the coal block allocation getting annulled, you had, in some sense, even laws like CSR, etc., which are unprecedented globally. And some of that did spook private investments. But since it happened so consistently year after year, it has taken us some time to reinstill renewed faith in the India story. And so you are seeing the impact of that happen in the last few quarters, where clearly there are green shoots.
So do you think that we are at a point from where the private capex is going to pick up even the levels that we are witnessing now?
I think so. And largely on account of the fact that the global, if you compare the global scenario, there is a reason we are the fastest growing major economy. It is not an act of, just some random luck. It's an outcome of tremendous amount of consistent effort. So I do think there is renewed trust. And that has been building year after year, budget after budget. You are seeing the kind of encouragement that private investment have received in a way that, unlike elsewhere in the world, where when governments spend a lot of money, it tends to crowd out private investment.
Right.
But India has not been a case with that ever, right? In the last 40 years, if you look at the data, when government spends a great deal on capex, it typically crowds in private investment, because you're fundamentally saying we are going to take care of the basics. Now it's for you to build the markets. So I think towards that, I do expect the private investments to grow further.
But critics also say, Dr. Ravi, that the government doing all the heavy lifting and allocating record capex is not a sustainable model.
Right.
The government can't do all the heavy lifting in the economy. What is your take on that? Do you think that this is sustainable in the long run?
No, in the long run, it is anywhere not going to be the case, because where you are seeing the government today are also very fundamental sectors, right? Roads, airports, whether it's the ports themselves, so basic connectivity. Where you are going to see renewed government investment, but not in a way that it's not going to be duplicating, because these are one-time and very long-term capex, right? So these are not going to continue beyond a certain number of years, but clearly the focus could shift into something else, pipe drinking water. Right? And you're already seeing all of that, except that these are very core fundamental public goods.
Right.
And these go into long-term enhancement of human capital and growth in productivity. That cannot possibly be done by private sector. So I think so far the government strategy has been very clear. And so there should be no fear about this not being sustained. I think the nature of this will shift towards maybe second order. But in no way is it crowding out private investments.
Okay. And also one thing that I want to ask you, the government is almost completing 10 years now, right? When you look it from the vantage point, how do you assess the economy in the last 10 years? And what are the top 3 achievements as far as reforms are concerned that you see that happened in the last 10 years?
Well, some of it, of course, I think was structurally getting the economy back into a robust phase, because we had become very vulnerable. Largely on account of the banking sector itself becoming extremely vulnerable with very high NPAs, non-sustainable. So I think cleaning up of the banks, bringing in IBA, etc., were very fundamental to clearing up the sector. But there have been some parts of the growth and the last 10 years which were also on account of what happened globally.
Right.
I think our renewed focus on industrial policy, in the form of Make in India, and not just in the defense, but I mean Make in India at large. I think it has been a long-standing correction in our psychology of growth, where many people, many experts believe that we will be unique in making a transition from agriculture to services. Services are very important; they have served us really well, but in no way will they ever be a substitute to a robust manufacturing base. So I think the renewed sort of the agenda in the last 10 years on manufacturing is, number one, a response to the global reality.
Right.
And number two, I think it is much needed. We are a very labor abundant economy, relatively semi-skilled. The global economy is growing, whatever the growth rate might be. But as Africa grows, as Latin America grows, as the rest of Asia will grow, their demand for what is core, simple manufacturing, simple electronics, simple leather, simple wooden, etc., core, these things will continue to grow. So we are not going to be another China, largely triggered by OECD growth in demand for manufacturing, but the global demand. And I think towards that, our renewed focus and our consistent set of, whether it is the PLI, whether it is Make in India, these are very important. And so it's not one policy, but I think it's the philosophy around manufacturing, which I think is a very, very important thing. And the third, I would say, is not really a reform, but more the fact that the pandemic was a wake-up call in a way that public health, we have started to put focus in ways not just from the production side, whether it is a pharmaceutical and vaccines, etc., but also from the service delivery side. You are seeing public health manage the pandemic in a way that is unprecedented. And I think the renewed focus on healthcare itself as a strategic sector of future growth, for me, these are the 3 big stand.
Since we talked about the reform that has happened in the last 10 years, let me take this opportunity to ask you, what are the top 3 areas that reforms are needed and budget should address it immediately, that will take India's growth story to another level?
By now we know that budgets are really about, revenue and expenditure accounts. Right? We talk about it. And we do make certain policy announcements, which are warranted by when you take into account receipts and expenses. But I'll tell you, a lot of reforms have been happening between budgets, right? When you look at the way the executive functions, I think reform has been a continued process. So I, for one, do not expect major announcements to happen during budget time, simply because I have seen bigger announcements happen outside of the budget cycle, as it should be. I think, by now, India is too large and complex an economy with a very robust and growing private sector that we should wait for budget time for major reforms, right? That is number one. But I think structurally, if you look at the trend, then the budget is the time when we want to look at what has been the performance in terms of the privatization process as a whole. Because clearly the intent is there. We are trying to get the government out of many sectors where there is inefficiency. Of course, you're talking about a global reality where you have state-owned enterprises from other countries that you are in some ways trying to compete with. So that role will always remain, at least in the foreseeable future. But there are certain other sectors where we do want those privatization, those goals to be realized. Knowing very well that it's a very difficult objective to meet. The implementation of a lot of these things, it's not again simply a finance matter. These go to the hearts of the way institutions are run, and the role of the courts, how we are going to be. But I think for me, that is one thing that I always keep a keen sort of eye on.
We also know that debt to GDP ratio has emerged as one of the alarming concerns, and many economists are flagging this, that India's debt to GDP ratio currently is at 82%. Is this a cause of worry for you?
It depends on where is the debt, what is it financing, right? And to that effect, I'm not alarmed. Because at this phase of growth of an economy like ours, under $3,000 per capita, it is all going towards long-term productivity enhancements. So I'm not concerned about our repayment capability. We are the fastest growing economy. We are likely to remain the fastest growing economy in the foreseeable future. So it wouldn't alarm me. Having said that, I also want to, say a little bit on behalf of creditor agencies, right? Creditor agencies, there is a reason they make noise about it, because that is their main business, so they do often put out red flags. But as someone whose basic view is that of our economy and long-term growth, I have absolutely no qualms at all. I think we are well poised. Our credit worthiness itself and the kind of productive asset building and productivity enhancements that are happening on account of this kind of debt, there is no reason for fear. And
since, Dr. Ravi, a lot of work is on freebies versus welfare policy measures, and we know that we are slipping into a general election where political parties will make a lot of promises as far as freebies are concerned. So where one should draw a line between social welfare policies and freebies? I think there are some thumb rules that I think gradually are emerging. I think, when you have big promises made on non-development aspect of a budget, right? Reversal of the pension reform. That's a big no-no in my view. States promising and financing a lot of these promises through greater debt. And so if their share of non-development spending, which is interest payment, is a very major part of that, when you see that growing in a way that it is unsustainable, that is a problem. When you see large vacancies not getting filled, that is a problem, right? So I think the thumb rule has to be that when promises are made which go towards non-development nature of expenditure, then it is a problem. But when you see promises which are going towards the development part of it, like we'll strengthen healthcare, or we'll strengthen education, we'll strengthen connectivity, all of those are wonderful things, because those are long-term productivity enhancing. They're all development spending. They go back into the economy and they affect 100% of the population, right? Unlike non-development spending, which does not. So pension is not for everybody, Right.
Unfortunately, it is for very well organized 5% of a state's population that works for the government.
Right.
And I think that is a problem.
And also AI, artificial intelligence, has emerged as a big focus area, right? Generative AI. How do you see AI as a whole impacting the jobs in India?
You know, jobs, you see the nature of the jobs will continue to change, and I think I'm very bullish on that sector, largely because we have a lot of last mile outreach problem, whether it is education, which is healthcare, I dare say even access to justice,
right.
like the kind of delays that we have. I think AI holds a promise. AI holds possibilities for us to bridge that gap. To improve outreach to that last mile. So I'm not as concerned as many people who think of it only theoretically, because if you are aware of the ground realities of India, then tech solutions, unlike elsewhere in the world, for us our digital public goods or the infrastructure as a whole, when we think of digital India, is mostly public goods in nature. We are trying to do it in a way that improves welfare, improves the quality of life of a ordinary citizen.